this week?
Can never hold something with a prayer.
Yeah, I can say it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chloe.
Yeah. Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for this day and for the opportunity to meet together and that everyone is able to be here. We ask that we will have a good discussion and that the Spirit will be present in our discussion. We are so grateful for our academics and the university that we get to attend and just the blessing that it is in our life. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
So did you guys get all of your reading done? I know there was a lot.
No.
Not even close.
I read in the car.
Did you get it done, Shauna?
I did.
Good for you.
Man, way to go.
I bet it's nice being in the car because you're almost like forced to read it. Yep. Whereas at home, I'm like procrastinating as long as possible.
Okay, so I finished it last night. So hopefully have any of you guys started on the book other than Shauna? No.
I thought I had it on ebook, so I've been trying to access it on ebook and find out where the link was and everything, and my wife reminded me I had the actual book. So when I got home from work today, I found the actual book. So I can start reading the actual book now.
Okay, perfect. Well, then
but I did the online readings.
It's a really quick. It's a pretty quick read.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So it's not long and boring and easy, and it's easy to understand. So that was nice.
Yeah, that's what I liked. It wasn't all a bunch of technical stuff.
Agreed. Okay, so we'll just start. It looks like there's several questions or several statements that we will kind of go over in this Zoom meeting of like what we have read. So it seems like you don't have to read the book to answer some of these statements. So anyway, we'll just kind of get started with those. So this is talking about same-sex marriage and how that ruling was done by the Supreme Court as well as the abortion on demand law. So anyway, the first statement is the Supreme Court had every right to do what they did. And how would you respond if someone were to say that?
I would argue that they had no right to do what they were supposed to do. The Supreme Court doesn't make laws.
Yeah, they were totally overstepping their bounds as the judicial branch. They were being legislators.
And I don't know what reading it was, but basically they had said it, I think it was in the Dr. Anderson's book, where he had said that it's 9 unelected officials who made that law, and then like most of them were from New York or something like that, and it was kind of crazy to think that they were the ones that created that law when so many of the states had already were against it and had already voted.
Yeah, and it wasn't even 9 of them; it was 5 of them. It was a simple majority of 5 who decided. The dissenting judges talked about how they had no right to make law, they had no right to establish policy, that they were overstepping their bounds, and they were ignored by the 5 who wanted to move forward with that.
Does anyone else have anything to add, or should we move on to the next one? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. I had kind of had a hard time deciphering or like trying to understand what the statement was saying, but the statement is, when we, the people, are bigoted, the Supreme Court needs to override our views to be more humane.
I felt like that was saying that the Supreme Court should decide what our behavior should be. and they don't, well, that's not in the purview of any of the government as far as like, I mean, people can be bigoted. It's not against the law necessarily unless they do something with that bigotry that is against the law.
Right. If they want to establish a law that says that it's illegal to treat a certain person this way, then we can write a law. We can have the law go to the House of Representatives. House of Representatives can filibuster on it and vote on it and then send it over to the Senate. If the Senate approves it, it'll go to the president. The president signs it into law, and we're good to go. But if we don't have a law telling people what to think or what to do, unfortunately, or fortunately, in some circumstances, people have the right to believe what they want to believe.
Oh, sorry, this is kind of off topic. Did we decide who was going to do the summary?
I started taking notes because I realized we didn't.
I thought, yeah. Andre, I thought that you said that last week.
Yeah,
though.
I was willing to do it, so I started taking notes.
Okay. And I can do one or the other next week too, so.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, I forgot to ask about that. Because I think I don't know if I was going to do it this week. I think I had volunteered, but since I'm leaving, so I can't do that. Okay, well, thanks, Andre, for doing that. Does anyone else have anything to say about that statement?
I was kind of with you, Emily. I was kind of confused about it and didn't really know how to answer it in the right way.
Well, I mean, the example is the make my cake bigot, right? The guy who didn't want to bake a cake for a wedding, it was a same-sex wedding, and the court came down and said, you have no right to refuse that you're going to do that. Yet, in my private business, I'm allowed to refuse service to anyone. You know, you see it everywhere you go. We reserve the right to refuse service, you know, to no shirt, no shoes, no service. You come in and you're smoking, we kick you out. Well, you come in and I have a business and I don't agree with you and I say I'm not going to make that cake, then you go find another baker who's going to make that cake, right? You don't have to have the judicial branch come in and say that you've made an illegal decision when there's no law regulating what you can or can't do with your business. If you make poor business decisions, you're going to go bankrupt because nobody's going to come to your business to buy your stuff. But look at Chick-fil-A, who closes early, is in 24 hours, and closes on Sundays, and everybody wants to go to Chick-fil-A because it's wonderful and we support their family values and we think they're fantastic. But nobody's coming to Chick-fil-A and saying, well, you can't close on Sundays.
I didn't think about it in that scenario. I like that. That makes sense. So how do you for the people that refuse the service, I guess if you don't believe in it, how do you do it in a way that doesn't seem like you're discriminating, I guess, if that makes sense?
You can't, because someone's always going to claim that you're discriminating. Whether it be, okay, if I come in and I'm loud and outgoing and I'm asked to leave the library because I'm loud and I'm outgoing, I'm going to claim that I'm being discriminated against for insert any possible reason here. Whatever the person who is being discriminated against is the discrimination. It's because I'm bald. It's because I wear glasses. It's because I'm too young. It's because I'm Mormon. It's because I'm alternative lifestyle. It's because I have too many kids. Whatever the person who's being discriminated against is going to perceive their discrimination, and they're going to make it loud and clear that this is why you're refusing me service. And no matter what you say about, no, I'm refusing you service because I don't agree with where my, okay, I don't know, you're a knife maker. A woman comes in to buy a knife to go murder her husband. I'm not going to make that knife for you. If you're going to go murder your husband, you're going to go murder your husband with somebody else's product. I'm not going to put my time and effort into something that I don't believe the end result is worthy of. And that's what the cake baker did. He said, I'm not going to make a cake for something that I don't believe should be occurring. And instead of that being him standing up for his rights, it all of a sudden became, you're a bigot, you're a fool, and we're going to regulate against you, and we're going to make you go out of business because we have a very loud voice and we have a very large political arena that is going to come in and cause all these problems. Sorry, am I being too loud?
No. So pretty much in those situations, you're probably going to come off like you're discriminating no matter what, right?
That's
Is that what you're
the
saying?
perception that they're going to paint.
Okay. That's tough.
It is. It's very tough.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't open their own businesses anymore.
I feel like it's hard. I know we've talked about this in the past, but like, you know, loving those who we disagree with, but also not supporting them in the way that they believe or the way that they live. And so I feel like it's a really hard line, like especially with the baker. You know, what was he supposed to do? Like you can care for those people, but you know, how do you show that you really do care for them when you're not baking the cake? You know, like it comes across as being discriminating. But really, like, you can still care for that person, but you just don't want to support that lifestyle. So I feel like it's just a hard balance. I feel like, and it's hard, and it's really sad that that's.
Okay, everybody else is moving but Emily, so I didn't lose everybody again this week, right?
No, I think you're good.
Okay, Emily, you're still here?
Okay.
Shauna, I still see moving, so just Emily froze. So, okay, she's
She's back.
I know I'm kind of getting bad connection on this meeting.
Me
Like
too.
people are cutting in and out.
Yeah. Well, oh.
okay. You're back.
We just lose Emily.
Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know exactly what happened. Okay. So the next statement is, it's in the 14th Amendment that the law should affirm my identity and dignity.
Yeah, what is the 14th Amendment?
Isn't it due process? Is that what it is?
Due process is the 8th.
Yeah, I wasn't real clear on that one either, what the 14th Amendment actually was, and I didn't look it up.
Okay.
It
14th
says the amendment grants.
The 8th?
All person born.
Yeah, Amendment 14, Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens in the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
Yeah.
And then sections 2, 3, 4, 5 talk about enacting laws and how they will be applied. But once again, that doesn't say that it's the government's job to support you in everything that you do. It's the government's job to protect you from laws that take away your rights, privileges, life to liberty, and pursuit of happiness and stuff like that.
That they were really loosely interpreting that then when they made that decision.
Very.
Because
in my journal, like what I had put for that. Oh, sorry. Anyway, what I had put for that is that the 14th Amendment does give them, like, they can be whatever they want to be, but it doesn't mean that, like, we still have the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and that this amendment does not say that we have the right to redefine marriage, or that the government has that right. That every person has the right to live the lifestyle they want regards to sexual orientation, but this does not mean that the 14th Amendment justifies redefining marriage. That's what I put. But I don't know if that even makes sense.
I think that made perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'm going to read it again. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens. So the opposite sex marriage being the way that we defined, that's not abridging or offending anybody's privileges or immunities, and nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nowhere in there does it say marriage. Nowhere in there does it say contractual obligations or opportunities to procreate and raise a family. It specifically states life, liberty, or property.
I really liked the way that chapter ended with the, I think it was Justice Roberts' statement that saying, you can celebrate this and you can celebrate that, and I can't remember everything he said that you can celebrate, but don't celebrate the Constitution because it had nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm. I like that part too.
I feel like it kind of summed up that whole, the Supreme Court case.
So what do we do about that? Because I'm really surprised, like that I put this on my post, my discussion board post. I'm really surprised that like the legislative branch or the executive branch didn't jump in and say, hey, this is not right. Why didn't that happen?
They didn't do it with Obamacare either.
The checks and balances didn't work.
Say again?
The checks and balances didn't work.
That's because
weren't even used.
Everybody doesn't want to be seen as the bad guy who's not going to get elected next election because they didn't agree with what they believe the majority wants.
But that's not what we elected them for. We elected them to do their job, not to worry about getting reelected.
But
so yeah, I'm just like, why did this even happen? How could it possibly happen?
Because unfortunately, government is for profit now.
My husband and I were talking about this. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, so if I did, I'm so sorry. You can interrupt me and tell me. But you know, the left, they don't really go through. They don't make laws the normal way. They usually have it be through the Supreme Court. The Roe versus Wade with the abortion law, and then with gay marriage. There really wouldn't be any way that would be legalized through the legislature. it really should be a state's matter, but it really wouldn't have. And so the only way that the left can really have those policies be addressed and make them legal is through the Supreme Court, which is really sad because they're the ones interpreting the law. They shouldn't be making laws. But you guys may have a different opinion, but that's what my husband and I were talking about.
I think you guys are.
No, I agree. And you said something about the only way they could do it legally. That's not really even legally if they do it that way.
Yeah. Did you say something, Andre? You were kind of, I don't know if I heard it.
I said, I think you and your husband are absolutely right.
That's it. Yeah, anyway, that was something that my husband brought up. I was like, you know what? I feel like it made sense to me because there's really no way that it would be, those policies would be passed in any other way. Okay, so we can move on to the next one. Same-sex marriage does not hurt your marriage. Or, sorry. Stop. That's the wrong one. Interracial marriage is the same as same-sex marriage.
What I got out of this one, I really liked from the Truth Overruled reading. I think his name's Ryan Anderson. He said that marriage can and should be colorblind, but it cannot be blind with regard to the two sexes. And then he goes on and kind of talks about how a person's skin has nothing to do with whether they can unite in marriage. But we shouldn't ignore the fact that people of the same sex, like that is where we shouldn't regard that as the same. Does that make sense? And then he talks about the sexual difference between a man and a woman, however, is central to each of these concerns. Men and women, regardless of their race, can unite in marriage, and children, regardless of their race, and they need their mom and dad. So it talks about how children need their mom and dad, and it doesn't matter about the color, but when it's like the same sex, that's going against it. So I kind of liked what he said there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Emily. I love that he talked about, like, if he used the word colorblind, but if any picture were to be black and white, you wouldn't really be able to tell a difference. You know, I feel like that really struck home to me where, you know, same sex, you can obviously tell a difference in a black and white photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was really glad that he addressed that, because when I read that question, I thought, oh, how do you? I wouldn't have known how to down this. Oh, sorry.
I couldn't really understand that. It was cutting in and out, Shauna.
Oh,
Anybody else
sorry.
hear it?
I said that I was really glad that he addressed that, because when I saw that question, I thought, I know why, but I couldn't really articulate it. And so he really articulated it well and gave me something to go off of.
Yeah, same here.
Now, what I liked most about when that came up was how he talked about how the whole idea of marriage for thousands of years has been to have kids. And that was the reason that a man and a woman got married. It wasn't the idea that, oh, we're going to get married and spend the rest of our lives together without kids and without a family because we want to be together for the rest of our lives. It was, we got married because we want to have children. We want to create a family. And I know that there are situations and there are families where kids never actually result from a marriage, but that doesn't change why marriage was created, you know?
Exactly. I felt like, too, in his book, he talked about how I think it was in this book, in Ryan Anderson's, maybe it was in the other book, but somewhere this week it talked about how same-sex marriage, it doesn't have anything to do with children, has everything to do with the love for two individuals, which that's never really what it's been about. Like, that's so important in a marriage, but that's never what marriage has been. It's never been founded just on love and companionship. It's about raising a family, and how that's just kind of out the window.
Yeah, that's the next question about same-sex marriages. Does not hurt your marriage. That kind of ties right into.
Yeah, I think that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. And the Truth Overruled, it goes back and he says the court's redefinition of marriage makes it about the romantic desires of consenting adults rather than about the needs of children and their right to a relationship with their mother and father. So I think that ties in really well with what you said about how it's more of becoming about the romantic desires of adults than about children and their need for a relationship with the mother and father.
Yeah, I think the last video that we watched with the lady from, I can't remember what organization she was from. Do you know what the video I'm talking about?
Claire's or Kara or
Can
something?
you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just kind of in and out a little bit.
Oh. Anyway, she was talking about that, how it's just a stamp of approval on the flag. Could you guys hear me?
I heard that she was
Or can you only hear my
then
car?
cut out again.
I can hear you, but it's cutting in and out. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
She was talking about how with same-sex marriage, it's not about family. It is about just putting a government stamp of approval on feelings, which they've never done. It's not what it's about.
So the video was about feelings. Is that what you said? Romantic feelings? I'm just trying to
I'm
understand.
sure it's because I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, she's frozen on my end.
Me too.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, she's back.
Well, she said that sorry. See if you can hear me better if I take my headphones out. Can you hear me better now?
I think it's more so the connection
Too much
rather than
car
the
noise.
Yeah. I think if we go back to what we talked about 4 weeks ago with the definition of family, we're redefining marriage at this point in addition to redefining family. And he mentioned the fact that the possibility exists that with marriage being redefined, no longer being a man and a woman getting married to have children, that possibly some men and women who would normally get married aren't going to get married now because that redefinition of the term marriage, the watered down version that now exists, is not what's important to them. They don't, I mean, it's like getting a degree, sending in somebody $100 and they send you a degree that says you've got your BA in internet protocol or whatever, and the degree means nothing, as opposed to going to college for 8 years and getting your bachelor's degree and doing what you need to do where it actually means something.
Does anyone have anything else to say about that question? Okay. So we'll move on to the last statement. And the last one is, religious liberty has nothing to do with the Supreme Court's ruling. What would you say to that?
It definitely does, yeah. What I got out of it, I just really liked the truth overruled reading, I guess, because he talks about how it creates serious questions about religious liberty, and that many good and decent people oppose same-sex marriage as a tenet of faith in their freedom to exercise religion is unlike the right imagined by the majority, actually spelled out in the Constitution. And then he goes on to say that when marriage was redefined democratically, citizens could accompany it with religious liberty protections, but the majority's decisions impose same-sex marriage cannot, of course, create any such accommodations. And I like how he says it's important now for citizens to demand that their elected representatives do so. So I think that goes back to the point that it's important for us to vote for those elected representatives, that we still can have those religious liberties.
I feel like it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the person, like make me a cake bigot, that one chapter heading, and how, he got his business was run into the ground because of his beliefs. And I feel like that's the exact opposite of what this statement is saying, is that really religious beliefs are hindered by this ruling, because you can't be against it, or else you're called a bigot and people will do anything to destroy your beliefs or your faith or your business or whatever it may be. It just kind of goes hand in hand with having more laws and regulations, especially on social issues. There's no way to not have more. There's no way that you're going to have more religious freedom. It will always go down.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the simple fact is that church and state were established to be different to begin with. And now you have state coming in and telling you what you're allowed to believe on a religious aspect, or what you're allowed to do from a religious aspect. And that's just wrong. That's not the way our country was created. That's why the founding fathers first came to our country, was seeking religious freedom and the ability and the opportunity to practice religion in the way that they wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. So does anyone else have anything else to say about that statement?
So can you guys hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
I got kicked out and came back in. But so I don't know if you talked about this, but I didn't. He talked about in the Ryan Anderson, in his book, he talked about how religious people are being labeled as bigots just for living their religious beliefs. And that is taking away our freedom of religious beliefs. We're stating, if you guys talked about that while I was out or not.
Yes.
That was all.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's move on. This will probably be the last question we do, since the last two questions are more about the book. So this question also pertains to the book that we're supposed to read this week. But the question is, does the UN seem to be individual or family focused? And explain your answer. So it talked a lot about this in the book, but we've also watched videos, I think with Marina or something, where she's gone to the UN. So not only does the book talk about it, but we've also had other material throughout the class that's talked about the UN. What is your answer to that question? The question is, again, does the UN seem to be individual or family focused?
So what I got from the Sacred Duty book, I felt like it's really individual focused. And what the book said is that the United Nations has only its sovereign nation members. It has no we the people. So it's not a really good representation of a democracy. That's kind of what I got out of the Sacred Duty book.
Yeah, and there's one part in the book where it talks about the women's census. I think that's what the group is called, and just how it was crazy, the manipulation that they used in order to get their way as radical feminists. And it was just so sad because it had nothing to do with families or about society. It was all about the individual and having individual authority and individual power, rather than creating a good society for children and for future adults and for current adults.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too, Emily, how that one caucus, the Women's Caucus, was just so worried about their own agenda that they didn't really even care about anyone else or take the time to look at anybody else's views.
Yeah. And in the one part, especially when there were supposed to be 10 speakers, that there were like 300 people that were nominated, and basically the women's census was like, no, none of these speakers are actually going to speak. We're going to have our own speakers. And anyway, just made me so upset, because it's like, how do you expect like for everyone to get their voice out if you're just going to control the meetings? And anyway, just sad.
Yeah, kind of sounds like it's like micromanaged in a way. It's like we want to portray that we're we the people or democracy, but really it's mostly individual focused.
Yeah, and it was, and I thought too that they they didn't focus on anything that was a family. It was individual members of the family, like women and like children, but not how the things that they were proposing would affect the family as a whole.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, well, I'm not exactly sure if we should like keep discussing, because there's a couple more questions, but they're more related towards the book as a whole. Or we can just cut it short this week. I know that the amount of time that we're supposed to talk is 50 minutes if we have 6 members. There's supposed to be like 8 or 9 minutes per member that's supposed to talk during the Zoom meetings. So since there's only 5 of us and we've been discussing for about 40 minutes, we've probably hit that requirement. So I think we're good to go with a summary, but does anyone have any objections with that?
I don't know if you want me to put my input on the next question or not.
Oh yeah, I love it.
The next question kind of talks about, even though it was largely about Richard Wilkins' experience, it says, what important supporting roles did you see others play in his account, and why is it important to recognize this? So one lady that I noticed was like that played a good part in the role of helping him was Susan Roylance. So she was the president of the United Families International at the time, and she was a good friend of his, and she really kind of motivated him to write about traditional families and to be an advocate and influence like the world with his findings and studies. So I kind of found that interesting, just how her influence helped him to be more vocal with his findings and studies. I think that's kind of important for us to remember is, I don't know, if we kind of help each other and motivate each other to have a voice and be heard. So I thought that was interesting that we got asked that question.
So there was a lady named Susan and another one named Sue. Is that right, Emily? Do you remember?
I don't remember actually.
There was one that.
Is it the same person? Did he?
I don't know, because there was one person that told him like we need to do something, and she was the one that got him to go to Turkey. Is that the same person that you're thinking of?
I think so, because she got him to go to, yeah, if I remember right. Don't quote me on that though. Now I'm like second guessing.
Okay,
But
I think I'm thinking of the right person, because there's one a little bit later on, another lady too that is influential. I agree. Like she came with him to the UN and brought like a computer and a printer and helped him to be able to make these speeches for the UN, and just wanted him to be a part and to be an advocate for families. And it's like, that's, for her, it was such a big role for her. Like the Brother Wilkins got a lot of maybe the fame, but he wouldn't have been there without her and wouldn't have been able to have that kind of influence if it weren't for her.
yeah, definitely. I like that. That's so true though. Kind of goes back for me to think that we wouldn't, I don't know, with the influence of like church members or family members, we wouldn't really be able to be where we're at, I guess. Like people who influence us have a huge impact on our lives, good and bad.
Okay, should we go with the summary and then call it good this week?
Sounds good to me. We talked about same-sex marriage, abortion on demand, and how the Supreme Court mandated the laws. Now they're not supposed to make laws. They aren't supposed to. That 5 people who made law and ignored comments by others in their similar area have influenced nationally our entire country. We talked about how the Supreme Court should not and cannot regulate our conduct or our choices, but that's exactly what they're attempting to do. We talked about the baking a cake for people whose choices you don't agree with, and if it's his choice, he makes a bad business decision, he's going to suffer in his business, as opposed to, and just because I mentioned it, Chick-fil-A, which promotes Christian values, but still continues to get service, even though you have a lot of the naysayers who want to bash them and say that they're anti-LGBT and all that other stuff. They still do a world of business because there are people out there who believe in their values and agree with them. We talked about the 14th Amendment and how the government cannot give us things but can protect us from things, and that's why they enforce the laws or they implement new laws through the existing system, not the one that they're using now, where the legislative branch is trying to make laws. We talked about how states should be the ones making these laws, not the federal government, and that same-sex marriage does hurt our marriages because marriages used to be about children, and excuse me, the redefinition of the word family and of families is causing relationships to have problems with defining marriage. And does the word marriage still mean something? The Supreme Court decision absolutely infringes upon our religious liberty because it tells us what we're allowed to believe and what we're allowed to do. We need to speak to our representatives and make our voices heard so that we can try to prevent this from happening again. The UN seems to be individually focused and that they do not represent a democracy because it only has the member states that have actually signed on who want to be part of it, as opposed to everyone who would need to be a part of it to have it be a democratic voice, and that it focuses mostly on individuals instead of families as a whole. Anything anybody wanted to add?
Sounds good.
Sounds
All
great.
right. Thanks everyone for coming. I'll post the recording up tonight when I get back from open house at my kid's school. And we'll see everybody again next week when we figure out we're meeting again. Chloe, can you give us a closing prayer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for being able to meet together. We are so thankful for our education and this class and what we learned from it. We ask that we will have a good rest of our night and a good rest of our week. And we ask that Shauna will travel safely to Utah for Thanksgiving. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
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 Thanks everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a good week.
Bye.